Alright guys, here is a quick video in Module 4 on the topic of differentiation. This may not be a word that you have heard described before, so I'm going to dig into it with you and help you understand what it means and how it may be impacting the relationship that you're in. So here's the lesson outline. We're going to be describing what is differentiation. How does being in a differentiated posture, how does it benefit me? How does it benefit my relationship? I want to discuss this concept of retaining your own shape and what that means, as well as describing pretty specifically how do I do that? How do I start practicing retaining my own shape? So in this concept of differentiation, you're going to be considering this big picture of how do I both free myself maybe from my family's perspective, from others' perspective, from cultural perspectives of pressure and judgment, as well as staying connected in the most important relationships in my life. So let's describe differentiation of self and how that shows up as both freeing yourself and staying connected. The process of freeing yourself from your family's processes to define yourself is at the base of differentiation. It means being able to have different opinions and values from your family members. That may include both your family of origin, the family you came from, as well as your family of choice, the family that you have created now. In this clarifying and freeing yourself, the balancing component to this is also staying emotionally connected to others. So both clarifying your own self, freeing yourself from their desires to define you, as well as staying connected. So we've got autonomy and connection, both balancing. The ability to be both in emotional contact with others, yet still autonomous in one's own emotional functioning, is the essence of the concept of differentiation. This is by Kerr and Bowen, an article in 1988. In this, we have this desire we don't need to fix. Differentiation is a product of a way of thinking that translates into a way of being. Such changes are reflected in the ability to be in emotional contact with a difficult, emotionally charged problem and not feel compelled to preach about what others should do, not rush in to fix the problem, and not pretend to be detached by emotionally insulating oneself. So, right, you hear that balance of both being autonomous yet calming yourself down so that you can stay connected. So we have this wide spectrum of the variations of differentiation, right? So on one end we have overconnected, and on the other end we have underconnected. We have fusion, overconnected, and we have cutoff, underconnected. Differentiation of self is that middle road balance of both of those reactive, intense positions. So let's consider fusion, that over-connected posture. This is when individual choices are set aside in the service of achieving harmony. I'm just going to make myself smaller so that everyone around me doesn't have to navigate my space. People form intense relationships with others, and then their actions depend largely on the condition of the relationship at any given time. So that means that I'm constantly taking the temperature of other people around me in order to determine whether or not I'm okay, in order to determine what choices I will make. I'm taking the temperature of other people. I'm paying attention to how a particular relationship is going to inform me of my own choices. This is fusion or overconnected. My decisions depend on what others think and whether the decision will disturb that over-connected posture of the existing relationships. I imagine all of my relationships are quite fragile, and I consider what other people will think and whether or not the decision that I'm considering making is going to disrupt this over-connected posture. So you can see how bound up, how anxious, and how intense over-connection ends up kind of getting a person into the position of being that way. So let's consider the other end. Let's consider the under-connected posture, which we'll also describe as emotional cutoff. It's the natural process of emotional distancing. It's the pressure valve of the emotional system. So we know that most of the time, if not all the time, under connection comes from an initial over connection. I've been really bound up by the posture and the opinion and the judgment and the criticism of others. And so in order to insulate and calm myself down, I go into cutoff in order to release this emotional pressure valve. The challenge is that distance, over distance, seems to leave people primed for over connection. So then it keeps on being a replicating cycle. The more an individual uses cutoff to manage attachment to their own parents, the greater their vulnerability to over closeness in current relationships. So when I've used cutoff to manage the intensity from my own parents, it primes me for being in fusion in future relationships. Then, of course, if I'm in fusion in future relationships, I'll also need to be using cutoff in order to manage that intensity. And so you can see how it's just a vicious cycle that keeps replicating itself, which is why the posture of differentiation is so crucial in order to manage the intensity that naturally occurs in relationship. So differentiation helps us navigate staying out of either the over-connected or the under-connected, or when we naturally find ourselves there, how to center ourselves back into middle road. One of the other ways we can describe differentiation of self is retaining shape. That means being you, staying you, which would mean you would need to know who you are. So we can talk about using your values to retain your own shape. Here are some tips for that. Use clarity of values to guide your behavior. If you have some set of values that is helping you determine your choices in life, you are much less likely to be depending on other people's comfort and discomfort to help you make choices. Set and follow through with self-limits, deciding that you deserve to have a lane, you deserve to take up space, you deserve to have limits, meaning you're not an infinite resource, would give you the space to both set and follow through with really healthy boundaries. And then also stay in the discomfort. That means when other people have gotten uncomfortable in a situation, we work to steady ourselves not to shift into cutoff, because then that primes us again for fusion in the future. So how we're able to steady ourselves, calm ourselves down, and hang in the tension of difficult conversations is going to be a really important piece of that as well. We just talked about how do you retain your own shape. Now let's consider how do you lose your shape. Well, you drop your values-based preference and just say, never mind, let's go with what you are feeling uncomfortable about. You may obscure yourself with dishonesty, not being true about what you're thinking or feeling, or either vague, superficial conversation, not letting people know what's really going on for you, as well as using other people's comfort or discomfort as your base, as your guide, as your thermometer on how am I doing. So let me give you some examples of what that may sound like in conversation. So fusion-led thinking, meaning that over-connected, versus self-led thinking, that differentiation of self, values-based, retaining your shape thinking. Fusion-led thinking may sound like, so I see you're struggling, it's definitely my fault. Self-led thinking, I see something is going on for you. Do you need to talk later? Inviting them into connection while giving the other the opportunity to say yes or say no. Fusion-led thinking may sound like, I'll help you now, but then let me just stuff all of my needs, my resentments, my exhaustions, and I'll just deal with those on the side. Side note, you probably won't ever deal with them. They'll just come up in some explosion. Self-led thinking may sound like, I want to help. Here is what I have available. It doesn't assume that I am an infinite resource, and it doesn't assume that I can show up endlessly for this conversation. Okay, another fusion-led thinking. How can I fix, rescue, save, eradicate this discomfort that you're feeling? That's my job. I will feel validated if I rescue you. Self-led thinking. I will on purpose tolerate my discomfort regarding your discomfort, knowing that your discomfort is not a sign of failure for me, nor am I responsible for managing what's on your side of the fence. I commit to calming my own self down because I believe in you that you can manage your struggles, and I believe in my own self enough to know that I can calm myself down and I deserve to be taken care of. Fusion-led thinking. You know what? I don't want to risk losing you or upsetting you. I'm just going to ignore my feelings. I'll stuff them. They don't come back up, right? Self-led thinking sounds more like, I can both respect your feelings and still nourish myself. The nuance in all of these self-led thinking components, you can hear that it takes navigation. It's not binary. It's not all or nothing. It's not either we're on top of the mountain or we are obliterated. In each of these, there's holding tension, there's nuance, there's navigation to consider. So you can see the theme of both the fusion-led thinking, the over-connected, overly intense, overly reactive, overly connected to other people's experience in order to inform my own, versus the self-led thinking that has a lot of self-care, a lot of self-compassion, a lot of clarity imbued within it. I'll be honest, I spend plenty of time swinging between overconnected and underconnected, and as I'm running past middle road, differentiation of self, I catch a quick glimpse of it. And the goal is that quick glimpse just grows larger and larger. We spend more and more time in that middle road, in that differentiation of self, as we're moving between both ends of the spectrum. Okay, you've arrived here at the end. I will see you in the next video.